black sheep of the family, who had been removed from the family register. His angry wife reminded him that regardless of the register, the two of them were still bonded by blood and should help each other. And yet, as he appealed to her conscience, she realized that he was aware of her assassination request. She started to tremble, but reassured herself that there was no proof of it, as the first lieutenant was already dead. She screamed at her husband to ask his son for the military antidote, as it would greatly help him with his promotion evaluation. She affirmed that her family's territory could no longer support them, and that the general also needed to think about the tuition of his two other sons. And so, for that reason, General Kim asked her to go see her stepson herself. He reminded her that his intentions were clear. With that being said, the wife was left frustrated. And just like that, she left the room, claiming that she would do her own thing before violently slamming the door behind her. The general was finally alone. His son, whom he had presumed to be dead after months of disappearance, turned out to be living quite the life in the free city. In fact, the father was glad to see that his son was spending the rest of his days happily. Meanwhile, at the lively market of the free city, inside of the Flame Boutique, from among countless expensive suits that looked alike, the protagonist was given an attire like no other. The mage affirmed that it suited him very well. Taeju was particularly pleased with this excellent coat made from magical beast leather. It wasn't heavy, had good defensive stats as well as good temperature control, and its color was also perfect. To top it all off, the mage had given him the many pockets that he had requested. The lady who had found this request odd finally understood its meaning, seeing how Taeju used many weapons, and asked him if he was also a hunter. Taeju decided to pay for his 3.4 billion won new coat, but the mage affirmed that she was simply paying back his kindness. Our hero pointed out how the lady must have been quite embarrassed because of him, as this gift was already meant for someone else. But the mage reassured him that she had already compensated the customer in question. Tianyu took a brief moment to think. With his mind made up, he decided to ask for several other products. His goal was to help the lady's business while acquiring multiple gifts for the orphans. The mage had no choice but to agree and asked him to wait while she packed everything up. It was rather refreshing for her to deal with a good person for once instead of the average irritating awakener. At that moment, someone else entered the boutique. A mysterious man rushed to greet our hero, claiming that he had been searching for him. He then quietly approached him, to whom Suk introduced himself as the CEO of UJ Pharmacy. At that moment, Tianyu stood wary of the man. The CEO quickly realized that this unexpected visit had gotten on the protagonist's nerves. The young man affirmed that this was the case and asked the CEO how he was able to find him. Hoon Suk clarified that the Pharmacy Association knew everything in the free city. With that being said, he decided to cut straight to the chase. Jo Hoon Suk demanded that the hero sell them the mosquito antidote. Tianyu couldn't help but feel like he was being threatened. The CEO affirmed that he was simply asking for a favor, which our hero immediately declined. Hoon Suk even offered him all of the means to break the contract with Bei Kong Pyo. Yet Tianyu affirmed that he had already given his word. When asked to sell the formula for 5 billion won, our hero clarified that he would never sell it so cheaply. The CEO was starting to lose his patience. He clarified to the young man that upsetting him wouldn't make his life in the free city any easier, but the martial artist couldn't care less as he dismissed the man. At that moment, the lady came out thinking that a customer had entered. So Tianyu explained that this was nothing but a beggar whom he had sent away. Once outside, Jo Hoon Suk decided to make the protagonist swallow his words. And so he immediately made a phone call and urged his people to start the regular operation. Later that day, at the border of the free city where the protagonist's mansion was being constructed, he was seen carrying many bags. He finally arrived at this location. The old owner was intrigued after seeing him carrying so much. Taiju explained how he had bought the orphans some clothes as a way of expressing his appreciation to their director. At that moment, the old man started to cry. He was overwhelmed by the hero's kindness to the point where he promised to become an even better person. Taiju was pleased by this reaction. He was also thankful to Hong Pyo, as because of him the construction of his mansion had been running smoothly. And as he pointed out that he wanted to accept his proposal, the old man asked him if he was certain about it. Taiju declared that he had made up his mind after receiving a visit from Jo Hoon Suk. This greatly angered the director, who was worried that the CEO had harmed the protagonist. Taiju reassured him that he was simply threatened and explained how this interaction reminded him of how people treat the powerless. For that reason, he decided to take the advice of the old man and create his own pharmaceutical company, urging the old boss to keep helping him. Taiju then asked the old man to keep up the good work with the construction until he came back. While waiting for his new company to see the light of day, the hero declared that he wanted to go and create new drugs. Yet on the inside, he was particularly annoyed by the fact that no one had noticed his expensive new coat. The Chaos Form Poison Spirit Art was developed by the Supreme Poisonous Demon, the strongest warrior in all of Murim. It was a mix of the traditional techniques of his clan, as well as the 5 elements chi cultivation with a little inspiration from other martial arts. It was divided into 10 stars, with each level allowing the user to acquire a new ability. After acquiring 10 stars, one would need enlightenment in order to get the poison spirit, which was the key to the secret technique, 10,000. Torrential Petal Rain. This technique allowed the poison demon to take down the heavenly demon who was the head of his demonic cult. Back on Earth, in the magical beast outbreak zone, a powerful shockwave had occurred. A fight between man and beast had broken out. The poison user took a deep breath. He firmly grasped his knife before planting it into the skull of his opponent. And just like that, the giant monster was taken down. Tian Yu was able to achieve a crushing victory. He didn't expect something called the Poison Claw Lynx to be this big. Because of its tough skin, Tian Yu had a hard time fighting it with his internal energy and weapons. He was currently at the 3rd star and between a 1st and 2nd-rate warrior, which was a pitiful state of power and the reason why he needed to consume the poison of monsters. Tian Yu stumbled upon a large poisonous gem and began to think of how cultivation was an easy task with the knowledge of the old martial artist. Seeing how he had all of this knowledge on his side, it would be easy for our protagonist to achieve quick growth. At first, his body was unable to handle a lot of poison. Yet seeing how it had now stabilized, he was finally ready to surpass the 3rd star. For that reason, he started to fantasize about the poison of the spore poison water deer. Only then did he snap back to reality and realize that he must recover his very expensive throwing knives. The spore poison water deer was a peaceful creature that didn't attack humans. It had 2 humps on its back, making it comparable to a camel. In the blink of an eye, Tian Yu decapitated the poor creature without giving it a second thought. The most terrifying thing about this creature was the fact that its humps exploded once it died. With that, its microscopic toxic spores were released into the air. Just like that, the hero found himself surrounded by countless poisonous bubbles. This poison was powerful enough to melt gas masks and needed 60 minutes before dissipating. Naturally, after careful examination, the hero decided to absorb the poison at once, as it was the strongest he had ever seen. And so it began. Tian Yu started to use his power in order to absorb the poison. He tried his best to concentrate. His goal was to focus all of the poison energy. By doing so, he would be able to absorb it. If the protagonist managed to succeed in absorbing all of the poison, he would finally be able to reach the next star. Later that day, after countless hours of chi circulation, the hero began to think that he might have absorbed too much of the deer poison, as he had spent a lot of time turning it into internal energy. Since Earth had a better poison diversity than the martial world, our hero was assured of quick growth. He refused to experience weakness once again. In fact, he didn't want to bow in front of anyone any longer. With that, after countless hours of hard labor, Taiju Kim finally achieved the 4th star. With that being said, he finally got up. His trip to the mountain was longer than expected. Yes, he was able to grow stronger and even found an antidote to the poison of the water deer. Thus, Taiju decided to go back home. Seeing how he was worried about the YJ pharmacy, he didn't want to waste any more time. That night, at the drugstore of the old owner, the hero finally placed his backpack down. Taiju then rushed to greet the old man. He assumed that things must be going very well seeing how the shelves were empty. Bike expressed how worried he was as the protagonist had been unreachable for 15 days straight. The worried receptionist also welcomed him back. Taiju apologized and explained that he needed to focus on training and research before asking about the problem at hand. It turned out that many pharmaceutical companies had taken their items off their shelves and didn't want to supply more. To make things worse, the Autonomy Committee's Drug Approval Department asked for the ingredient list of the antidote in order to check for side effects. Taiju immediately realized that Jo Hoon-suk was behind all of this. The owner explained that this was the CEO's favorite hunting method and revealed to the hero how he was the general emperor of the committee. On top of that, refusing to provide the ingredient list would result in the item being forbidden to sell. After careful reasoning, Taiju realized that the enemy must still have more trouble in store for them. The low-life individuals were acting just as he had expected, which is why the hero decided to take the enemy by surprise. Thus, Taiju proposed to Hong Pyo to double down on the threat of the committee, but the owner didn't quite understand what he meant. Our protagonist claimed that they should stop selling their product seeing how it was rumored to have side effects on the consumers. Throughout that night at the orphanage, smoke was rising through the air and meat was being cooked. The entire orphanage, along with their guest of honor, was having a little barbecue. After taking the first bite, Taiju was left completely stunned. The meat that he had just tasted was absolutely heavenly. The taste of the spotted poison water deer was considered to be the best in the whole empire. Taiju quickly realized that the rumors about the emperor gathering all the carcasses of the deer that could be purified from poison were actually true. The fact that he had prepared the antidote against this poison was the best choice he had ever made. At first, our hero simply wanted to protect the civilians from the poison of the deer in case of a magical beast wave, but things were now different. It was safe to say that this delicious food was addictive, which made the protagonist speculate that he should launch a deer meat business. He started to fantasize about how the emperor, renowned for his grandmaster swordsmanship, would become his #1 customer as he was addicted to the meat. At that moment, the director decided to say a few words. Hong Pyo thanked the protagonist for giving them such a delicious treat. He even praised him for having created an antidote for the water deer poison. Even so, the man expressed his worry about them closing the pharmacy for a long time. Yet, Taiju explained that this was for the better. Only time would reveal the result and show who would truly suffer the most from them not selling the antidote. On a random day of the week, Jin-Soo was particularly annoyed as the pharmacy had been closed for 5 days straight and he was about to run out of antidote bottles. Some people started to speculate that the rumors about the antidote having some serious side effects were true, claiming that it forced the old owner to close his shop. After hearing this, the beta tester was left particularly annoyed seeing how these two were gossiping just for the sake of it. Yet, as soon as he tried to intervene, someone quickly stopped him. Li Yun-shang was there to maintain order. The sight of the vigilante captain started to gather a crowd who gossiped about the YJ pharmacy being related to the committee. The captain asked everyone to keep walking before explaining that the committee decided to ban the sale of the antidote until they could check the formula for side effects. At that moment, the beta tester started to scream that there were no side effects and that without the antidote, they needed to use the bug-proof suits once again. As the complaints of the public became louder and louder, the vigilante captain couldn't help but smirk. He was annoyed by the fact that someone beneath him had the nerve to actually talk back. But in the end, he decided not to waste his blade on them and began to think about how annoying it was that the administrative officer was making him do this. And so, as everyone went on their way, the one and only loyal customer decided to stand his ground. Seeing this, the vigilante captain asked him if he had the power to back up his arrogance. And just like that, Jin-Soo fled the scene. The captain couldn't care less about the medicine. Yet he wanted to get his hands on Jo Hoon-suk, who manipulated the committee. Meanwhile, watching from afar on the phone with the administrative officer, Jo Hoon-suk expressed how happy he was to see that the officer had forced the vigilante captain to do his bidding for him. The administrative officer explained that because of him and the chairman, the third standing committee member would always be outvoted. Noting that Lee Yun-shik only steps in for extreme situations, the CEO explained that they had already started the second phase of the plan. He promised the administrative officer a huge reward and claimed that unless they acquired money by a miracle, the enemy wouldn't last much longer. Meanwhile, in the office of Lieutenant General Oh Jin-hyung, negotiations were being held. Taeju decided to give 1 million bottles to the Magical Beast Defense Corps at market price. The Lieutenant General paused for a second, and as he pointed out the extremely high price, Taeju became worried that he had upset the man by demanding the market price from the military. Yet, to his utmost shock, the officer beside him claimed that his commander seemed very pleased by this, as the Lieutenant General claimed that Taeju was selling his product for a rather low price. The young man was left particularly confused. Upon confirming that they had the necessary funds, the commander demanded that half of the money be immediately given to the hero as a down payment. Yet, Tien Has had one more product to demonstrate. Tien Has Ho wanted to create his own company, had been able to come up with a new product. The young man then unveiled the package and urged the commander to try it out. The master was left particularly confused as he didn't expect to receive meat that was cooked exclusively for him. The Lieutenant General explained how he had been avoiding meat recently for the sake of his health. Tien Has Ho urged him to give this meat to the Emperor. In that case, seeing how it was spore-poisoned water deer meat, the other officer in the room was left greatly stunned as this meat was known to have a texture like no other. The protagonist nodded in confirmation. Seeing how capable the young man in front of him was, the commander offered him the chance to rejoin the army. These simple words were enough to trigger the killer instinct of our hero. The Magical Beast Defense Corps of Mount Yuri exists as an order of the Empire. Its mission is to fight magical beast waves and control their numbers, which is why upon arriving, the commander felt burdened as a heavy duty was placed on his shoulders. Yet, then again, he had finally found a way to save himself. The Lieutenant General couldn't help but think about the water deer cure. At that moment, his subordinate informed him that the payment they had promised the hero was successful and that his orders were being carried out smoothly. The commander had already predicted that because of Jo Hun-suk, Taeju would turn to them, and he was informed about a hunt for water deer scheduled for the next day. With that, the master asked his subordinate to keep an eye on the drug maker and provide assistance if needed. The general then praised the adjutant who, despite having no connections, always showed impeccable results. The man felt glad as he was finally being recognized by his superior. At that moment, the commander raised his voice and placed his hand on the shoulder of his subordinate. The general couldn't help but cry as he urged the adjutant to rise with him through the ranks until they reached the emperor. And just like that, the two of them began to chant the name of our protagonist. Meanwhile, at the newly built-up Kim residence, the owner was talking about how he wasn't encountering any problems in creating his company. The old man offered to handle all of the paperwork soon after our hero picked a name for it. Taeju was extremely happy that he had successfully signed the contract with the military and that they had received great support from the Lieutenant General. The commander seemed to be worthy of his position as he swiftly made it known to the public that he had signed an exclusive contract with our protagonist. Baek Hongpyo then explained how he had used the 25 billion down payment from the military in order to repay their loan, but he also clarified that he closed his accounts in this particular bank seeing how much trouble they had caused him. Taeju claimed this to be the right call and urged him to use the rest of the money for the sake of the orphanage. He then clarified that after thinking about it, running a company on his own would be quite challenging, so he declared that he needed a trustworthy partner. And just like that, he offered the old pharmacist the chance to become the co-owner of his company. The orphanage. Director doubted that he could fill such big shoes as his skills only extended to a small pharmacy, but the hero thought otherwise. Taeju was a drug genius, yet when it came to the world of business, he was completely ignorant, which is why he needed help. Hongpyo didn't expect his benefactor to see him as a reliable partner, which is why in the end, he agreed. Yet, the old man insisted on getting only 10% of the profits, but the hero refused. Since his partner would be in charge of the operations alone, he insisted on him getting at least 30% of the shares. In the end, Hongpyo agreed, but claimed that he wouldn't be the one running things as he had someone much more fit for the position in mind. The old man was referring to Baek So-yun, whom our hero had once met in the bunker of the orphanage. According to him, she was his smartest child, which is why he would reach out to her at once. Hongpyo had been the orphanage director for 2 decades, meaning that he was connected to many members of society with different professions, making him powerful. And because of that, the hero became certain that it was the right call to make him his co-owner. Taeju then suggested combining their names in order to name the company and came up with Taehong Bio. At that moment, the old man declared that he had reached out to some of his oldest kids who became awakeners. This greatly confused the hero. According to the old man, the CEO of Yeji Pharmacy was an evil man, which is why Taeju was in need of bodyguards. The young man declared that he didn't need protection and urged his bodyguards to go shield their home. This greatly surprised the old man as it seemed like his partner had something up his sleeve. Even so, it was safe to say that the protagonist, free of markings, wasn't a powerful awakener, meaning that he was probably relying on his experience as a soldier. At that moment, the hero noticed the look in his eyes. As his concern was mistaken for a lack of trust, Hongpyo affirmed that this wasn't the case. With that being said, the hero decided to adopt a different method. He demanded that the orphanage director call all of the bodyguards at once. Taeju wanted to prove his power and test out the antidote against the deer poison, and the best way to do that was to go on a hunting trip with them. Later that day, in the magical beast border zone, the party started to progress through the forest. Some of the orphans began to admire the very expensive coat of the drug maker as well as his fine gear. Yet, even so, they were worried about him, thinking that he was weak. With that, one of them tapped their new boss on the shoulder. The 25-year-old Baek Chong-hoon, who was a user rank, decided to walk up front as they would be entering Magic Beast territory in order to ensure his safety. Taeju asked to be referred to as Hyungnim, a term that refers to someone not much older than the awakener. The swordsman then explained how, despite its good stats, the coat might get in the way and how as a user, he was a better fighter than the protagonist. Thinking that he had overstepped, the orphan immediately apologized. Taeju clarified that he understood his concern seeing how he was unmarked. Yet, he proposed to leave the discussion until after they dealt with the problem on their hands. This intrigued the swordsman. Only then did he notice countless eyes opening above his head. The awakeners began to tremble upon spotting the storm martens. And just like that, the beasts launched their attack. In the face of danger, the bodyguards braced themselves for combat. Chong-hoon didn't expect the monsters to appear so soon. With that being said, the drug maker decided to make his move. Out of his pockets, he pulled out a bunch of nails as well as some golf balls. The hero then braced himself and unleashed all of them at once. This was his technique, dagger burst. His bodyguard was left particularly stunned. Despite being weak, since they move in large packs, storm martens were to be taken seriously. Yet something unbelievable was happening to these creatures that would strike fear into the heart of a user rank. They had been totally disintegrated. To top it all off, Corporate didn't even break a sweat. The hero found himself quite annoyed with this swarm. According to him, it was so pitiful that it died before he could even use his daggers on it. Taeju couldn't afford to hurt the children of the previous owner. In order to quickly deal with the enemy, he used hidden weapons known as torrential rain, pure blossom needles, and iron pellets. The main issue for our hero was the fact that these weapons were irretrievable, meaning his wallet was going to take a good hit. Taeju was eager to reach the 7th star in order to finally acquire the retrieval skill. At that moment, the young swordsman approached our hero and asked him if he was one of those masters who could hide their marks. Taeju clarified that he wasn't an awakener to begin with and that he would take the lead. Chong-hoon tried to argue that he was tasked with his protection, but as Taeju effortlessly took the lead, the young man started to wonder who he truly was. Later on, after walking into the tall grass, the prey was finally in sight. A water deer was spotted. Chong-hoon started to panic and asked the protagonist about his plan. Taeju then pointed out how the deer thought itself to be untouchable because of its poison. He then asked everyone to take the medicine so they could start hunting. Even so, the orphans had their doubts. After all, this medicine was still in the testing phase. Then again, the orphans needed to support their father and had already seen the power and genius of the drug maker. Having considered this, they decided to showcase their trust in him. Chong-hoon decided to charge in, first asking his siblings to use the mana gun in case the prey tried to escape. With that decided, the swordsman pulled out his blade. He charged head first at the monster. Upon spotting the danger, the water deer started to scream. The creature was so loud that even the awakeners could barely hold their ground against its screech. Even so, the swordsman managed to escape the brunt of it by jumping into the air. From above, he unleashed his skill, bisection slash. Chong-hoon successfully beheaded the monster. The orphans stood on their guard as the spores were about to be released. Right on cue, the bubble on the back of the deer finally burst. The extremely poisonous spores were then released into the air. Taeju, who had his doubts at first, was extremely pleased with the results. The antidote was a success and the gutsy young man with little potential seemed promising as well. The orphans were overjoyed that the poison wasn't affecting them. Chong-hoon felt relieved by the success of the antidote. The protagonist affirmed that his point had been proven and that without its poison, the water deer was no threat. While some of the happy orphans apologized for doubting him, others claimed they had always believed in him. With the danger past, the hero decided to resume the hunt. Before moving on, however, he asked his bodyguard to take the deer meat with them, noting that once the antidote became public, the species would be hunted to extinction. Meanwhile, in New Seoul, located in the former region of Manchuria at the MG headquarters, the employees were as busy as ever. At that moment, someone approached Manager Beck. 30-year-old Se-yun, the youngest manager in the strategic planning department, answered the deputy head with a smile. The man, known as Joan Ju-hyuk, decided to cut straight to the chase and asked the girl if she was truly an orphan raised by Hongpak. She confirmed this. Intrigued by the fact that her father had been brought up, the deputy head, pleased to hear this, urged her to postpone all of her current projects. This surprised the young manager. Joan Ju-hyuk wanted her to return to her hometown to do him a favor. She didn't quite understand what he meant. The deputy head then pointed out how the creation of the company known as Taehong Bio was all over the news. Intrigued by his sudden behavior, she explained that she had read about this company creating the antidote for water deer poison. What she didn't know, however, was that her own father was the co-owner of this new company. The deputy head, acting on behalf of his powerful superiors, wanted her to go back to her father and get her hands on the antidote's formula. In exchange for doing so, she was promised a generous reward. Xiaong was annoyed that she was being asked to betray the orphanage director, but just as she was about to speak up, her phone started to ring. Seeing that it was her father, she asked for a quick moment to talk to him. Hong Bio started to talk with his daughter. The deputy head was eagerly waiting for her to end the call. In the end, the lady bid her father farewell with a smile. With that said, he asked for her final decision. Xiaong had decided to go back to her hometown. At first, this seemed like pleasant news for the balding man. Then, all of a sudden, she threw her badge at him. The youngest manager in the company decided to quit her job. She had grown sick of seeing someone as short as the deputy head trying to step on other people. With that done, she made her exit, flipping off her old boss who was screaming at her in anger. Later that night, inside the building owned by our protagonist, the orphans were working hard. Taeju praised them for their hard work. He then asked them to go back to the orphanage and let him take care of the rest. Chun-hun was left worried and tried to argue that his father had ordered them to escort the drug creator at all times. But Taeju demonstrated that he didn't need protection and urged the bodyguards to go back to the orphanage and protect it. Thus, Taeju began to think of how unlikely it was for someone to try and harm the only orphanage in the city out of fear of public backlash. Then again, there were many madmen among the sons of Adam, and the free city seemed to have a lot of them. For that reason, Taeju needed trustworthy allies like the orphans. After establishing the company and acquiring